Welcome to Dr. Taz, The Cost of Telling What You Survived. This is not a conversation about writing technique. This is a conversation about what it requires for you to tell the truth about what you've lived. Because many writers believe the challenge is finding the words, but what they're actually experiencing is the weight of facing what those words bring back. And without the right awareness and support, that weight can stop the story before it ever gets started. This series exists to change that. Today, I am joined by Felicia Brookins. Felicia, this is where we begin to unpack what writers are feeling and help them understand what is really happening beneath the surface. Felicia, I'm just going to jump right in because this is sort of heavy. When writers begin telling what they've survived, what is the first shift they need to understand about the difference between writing creatively and then writing from their lived experience?
Thank you for that question, Teresa. I would say that the very first thing they need to consider and be prepared for when they start to write their story is, are they ready to be honest about what it is that they have to say? You have to ask yourself, what is honesty? What does it look like for me? And am I ready to tell that or say that out loud? It has to shift for them from just creating a story and telling that story to processing the actual experience that they lived through. So are you ready to be honest and to say that out loud?
You know, that's very powerful, Felicia, because you're right. They can use all the creative techniques to enhance the story. But the obstacle, and I use the word obstacle because it's something that you have to overcome and you have to be mindful of it, is are you ready to actually process your lived experience for the masses?
Absolutely.
And that's sort of when I think about it, it sort of makes my heart go pitter patter because that's a daunting task. You know, many people believe survival means that they're ready to tell the story. From your perspective, how do you help someone recognize whether they're writing from their survival or writing from a place of healing? Because as you talked about, processing the actual experience. So how do you help them to understand that?
Well, I would say that it has to begin with listening to your body when you write. What emotions are you feeling when you write? Because you're about to be very vulnerable to people. And so when you start to write that out or say that out of your mouth, what type of emotions do you go through? Check that. And that lets you know, am I really ready to do this, or do I need to hold off maybe a little while and maybe do a little more self-reflection, a little more work on myself before I decide to put this out there? Because when I think about putting this out, I feel anxiety. When I think about putting this out, I experience anger or grief all over again. And so even though I get it all out on paper, that's great. But once I've done that, how do I feel? So I would say process your emotions and your feelings first, because when you go out in front of people and you get ready to tell your story, I would say that you need to be able to do so from a place of knowing you've survived that and conquered it, or whether or not I haven't, and I may put too much of my personal emotion into this, as far as the anger showing out, which could trigger somebody else instead of help them. What you want to do is help them with the story that you wrote.
Now, that is so important. So whether you're telling it orally or writing it, you are not wanting to trigger someone else. And there's a responsibility that comes with all forms of writing, but certainly writings where you are sharing your lived experiences, which are very emotional. And I like the fact that you use our senses, because as writers, we write through our senses, but using the senses as a way to check whether or not we are ready to share information or share certain components. Because you're right, we go through a physical, we just sort of be out of it, be tuned out as we're writing, but we react to what we're writing. Sometimes you realize when it's something that makes you laugh, you know, that was funny. But sometimes you read stuff and it's like, oh, that makes me want to cry. We have to pay attention to that, particularly when we're trying to get our story out. So, what
Yes,
often gets labeled as writer's block can be something deeper. Um,
absolutely.
so, with the way we're unpacking this, we've gone from shifting our mind to assessing readiness. Now I think we kind of need to diagnose what's happening. So sometimes people say, oh, it's writer's block, but how do you help writers identify when they are actually experiencing an emotional resistance instead of a lack of creativity?
I think it goes back again to how do you react? You know, you may read this and all of a sudden just feel your heart start beating fast and your mind feel like it goes blank and you just freeze. Okay, so that is your reaction to what you put on the page. And let me also say, everything everything doesn't have to be on the page right then. You can dump it all out, but you have to filter what it is you can share with the reader and what the reader can take from it and benefit from it. So I will say that it's going to go back to your emotions. Check yourself. When you write this on paper, is it that you're really telling your story and sharing it here, or are you writing that on paper and you are still very much so angry and you cannot get that out in order to be a tool or a resource for someone else? Check your emotions before you put out the finished product.
For the people in the back,
Uh,
check your emotions
check your
before
emotions.
you put
Be-
out the finished
be-
product.
because you don't want to splash your wounds on someone else. Your audience, your readers they don't need that. They don't need your wounds. You know, they have their own, so they need you to write this in a way that is helpful to them, that serves them as your reader and your audience.
Well, then, Felicia, at some point, the writing becomes a mirror, because we're really sort of
Mm.
talking about that right now. It becomes a mirror, and I love my movie, The Mirror Has Two Faces. But the question becomes, what is that mirror supposed to reflect? So, how do you guide writers when they begin to see things about themselves that they were not prepared to face?
Well, I'm glad that you used the mirror as the example, because that right there is where it starts. I would tell anyone, prepare yourself mentally to look in the mirror at yourself and face it, face the truth about it, so that you can move through it. And again, you won't splash it on anyone else. Look in the mirror and say, this story that I'm writing, okay, I want to know how is the best way for me to share this with someone else, because this is what happened to me. You may have to look in the mirror and just say it to yourself first. Let yourself hear the words to be the process. This is what happens to me. Why did this happen to me? What did it do to me when it happened? You know, this version of me that I am right now, is that because of what happened to me?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what process did I go through to change or survive it? Or have I survived it? Let me answer those questions first. Look in the mirror and answer those questions. Or if you're writing it down, stop and think through those questions and answer yourself. What did this do to me? Do I understand the difference between me changing for the better or me being a survivor or a conqueror, so that I can grasp how I need to put this story on paper and put it out to other individuals? You know, you got to be to balance the honesty with the responsibility that you're taking on by writing your story. I'm going to write my story. Okay, well, when you write it, Are you able to balance being honest with it and being responsible with it? Because your story involves other people. So let's start with you, asking the questions of yourself.
Felicia, many things are running through my brain. I thought about the old adage of physician heal thyself. And then
Mm,
I thought about, as you just was bringing it to a conclusion, your story is not just about you. Are you in a space of recovery where you can tell your story and not injure other people? And
absolutely.
for me, when I wrote Stronger, How Overcoming Life's Adversity Can Push You Into Your Purpose, I told it all. Well, I could tell even more detail, guys, because you just can't tell it all. But,
Mm,
I had to really think hard about the perpetrator. And I
absolutely.
finally decided, no, I'm not going to identify that person. And my reason why was because that person had a family. And I did not want the sins of the father to be visited on the sins of the children.
And
And
Teresa, that's ethical storytelling.
true, true. You're right. Mhm. That's it. You're right.
That's something to consider too.
Mhm.
Ethical storytelling. Is the truth going to do more to tell the truth, or is it going to harm someone else that's innocent?
That's innocent. And that's the thing that we have to really think about, because we do that self-confrontation. In my mind, when you talk about the ethical storytelling, my book is not the place that I should be confronting anybody. I should have already done my self confrontation and made a determination whether I'm ready to share my story. But my pen is not supposed to be a sword. I don't
Yeah,
believe, because then that
absolutely.
means I'm hurting other people, and that's not what we want to do as authors. So when writers feel the emotional weight of their story, because there is a weight to our stories, what should they understand about that feeling before they assume something is wrong?
I would say that first of all, when it comes to that feeling, you want to be mindful of it. You understand that you're writing your story, but are you writing that story to prove something? Are you writing that story to get revenge? Or are you writing that story to be a help? That's the first check. When it comes to your emotions and things you're dealing with, be mindful. Why am I really doing this? Because at the end, you say you want to I want to tell my story to help somebody. Well, then you want to make sure that you're writing it in that way, that you're writing it to help somebody and not to harm somebody. You want to be mindful as to whether or not you are maybe leaving out some key truths just because you're uncomfortable with them. Again, you have to determine, if I'm uncomfortable with this, am I leaving it out just because of me only? Or can I push through that and share it with somebody because it's going to help them? I'm trying to let them know I can relate. I'm trying to let them know you can get through it. Also, you want to think about whether or not you lose your own voice when you're trying to protect other people. You
Mhm.
should, but protect them to a point where, again, we don't want to do harm, but I want to tell this story. And so you have to go back again to that checklist when it comes to writing, because your writing can also show if you've healed, if you truly conquered this thing, or maybe you're still in the process of trying to survive it. But again, your readers, you could trigger them if you splash those emotions that are not healed and ready yet onto the pages and then onto them.
And that would be an unfortunate thing to do.
Yeah,
Because again, that's not the purpose. It should not be the purpose of sharing your lived experience. It should be to help someone
absolutely.
else. So being
Absolutely.
mindful of how we frame our emotional lived experiences when we are sharing that with other people. Now, many writers do not realize that they need boundaries. Many people don't realize they need boundaries, let alone writers. But writers, they don't
Yeah,
realize that they have to have
yeah,
boundaries when
yeah.
they are within their own story. When does that become necessary, and how do you begin introducing that concept for writers who think, oh, I'm just going to tell everything, even if they've healed? Well, you just can't tell it all. So how do you
Just
help them
put it
to
out.
navigate that balance?
I would say that's a decision that needs to be made when you start to write it
Mm-hmm.
and before you hit send on your manuscript. Because you also have to understand that when you're writing this, you're setting up, you should be setting up boundaries at that time, but you should also understand that writing and healing are not the same thing when you first start out. Understand what I'm about to do now. I'm going to write this, which can be healing or therapeutic for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean when I start writing this or get ready to push the send button that it shows that I am healed. Writing can open up wounds a lot faster, when you're not healed. So when you open up that laptop and start typing, that's the time where you need to start thinking about my emotional boundaries. I need to start thinking about what it's going to look like before, again, I hit send. You mentioned boundaries, which also made me think about the importance of authors understanding there's going to be times when they need to pause. When your emotions get too worked up, authors need to know when to pause. Your emotions get too worked up, you need to know when to stop and process what it is you're thinking or feeling as you pull that memory back up.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can go back to your page and start back writing. But you need to pause, process, and then go back, which means you may need to step away for a little while. And that can be early on in your manuscript. But start and think through it all first before you even, I would say, get started. And you may not have the full answers then, but as you go through writing that story, stay focused on your emotions and aware of what you're feeling so that it can help you know when you need to do those steps.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so important, Felicia, because basically what you're saying is it's almost like we're infusing another structure on top of our writing structure. And everybody
Absolutely.
writes different. And you write, for me, I write different for different things, because I write lots of different things. And so I write differently every time I pick up and start a manuscript. But with this sort of storytelling, you need a structure in place, and then you need to monitor the warning systems that we've been talking about, and then be willing and be at a place emotionally where you understand that if you got to pause, it has nothing to do with the story. It has nothing to do with your skill set. It has to do with your healing and making sure that what you are developing is going to be a healing manuscript for others and not one that's going to trigger. And when we're not in our right mind, meaning
Mm-hmm.
my trauma mind or I'm in my emotional mind, it's very
Mm-hmm.
hard, I believe, to look at what you've written and see it objectively. And I think
Absolutely.
that's what you were trying to get us to understand, that that's so important.
It's also that, it's for the writer, they have to understand that this is going to be a shift for them. You're going to shift when you're writing, because part of the reason you're doing that is the shift from that pain to purpose in your writing. You want your writing to be purposeful. You don't want to just write and say, well, look at what happened to me. This is what happened to me. You want your writing to say, look what this taught me and how it might also help you, what it can mean for you. Not just this happened to me and I just don't know what I'm doing. I just hate them and I just, all that. No, this is what I learned from this. This is what I went through. This is how I came out of it. And this is how you can too, because I want to be a help to you to do that.
Oh, that is so powerful. And like you said, it's almost like it's no longer about me.
No.
I'm shifted to you.
Transformation for other people, for the reader.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help you transform the same way I have transformed and conquered and survived.
Mm-hmm. That is so powerful.
I want to give you a tool, not a weapon.
Yes, a tool. We'll provide a tool and not the sword
Right.
that's going to hurt somebody else. Well, Felicia, there are writers who stop when it becomes difficult. 'Cause we already telling you guys it's gonna be difficult. How do you help someone determine whether they need to pause with intention or if they're stepping away out of avoidance? So, am I pausing with intention or am I stepping away because I don't want to deal with this?
I think with that, I would say to them, if you say, well, okay, am I pausing with intention or it's just that I don't want to do this? We're going to go back to, so when it gets to that point, what happens? Do I stop, take a deep breath, and start to just think back through it and talk myself down and bring myself back around? That to me is pausing with intention, because I went back and read this and it sounds like I'm shooting nails into somebody. I'm just really, really angry. And that's not what I wanted to do. So I'll go back and read it. And you will know, am I pausing because I need to pull back and be fair and helpful to the reader? Or am I intentionally walking away from this because I'm still so angry? If I keep on, I may say something that I don't want to say in this manuscript. So read it over again, step back, and then be honest and truthful with what you feel at that point to tell you why. Am I just pausing because I need to breathe and exhale, come down with myself? Or am I pausing because, am I stopping because intentionally I might add on something else here and it may get really, really ugly? Or let me go put up something else. Let me go think of something else I can add in here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is your attitude when you get to that place?
Mm-hmm. And we can get an attitude real quick.
with the people and with the book, with the
what
manuscript. Yes, sir.
Because that book is a living manifestation of what you've gone through. So
absolutely,
and it shows in your it shows in your word selection. The tone comes through, and so I like the idea of stopping. Let me read this again. Whatever I was writing last that made me think I got to walk away for a while and look at it objectively to see, is it saying that, oh, Teresa, you still got a little crack in that armor. You're not really ready to get to this part of the story.
Right.
Which is okay, because I may need to work on myself first before I get to that part of the story. And there may also be other parts that are not triggering for me at this time that I may could go and work on and then back. People write differently, guys, and then back into that section. And then I think also, Felicia, as we talked earlier, you don't have to tell it all. So there could be a section that you're just not ready you don't want to tell. But does that then take away from the story? If it doesn't, leave it out. You can't do anything. Leave it out.
Anyway. So, it may come up in a face-to-face conversation you're having with your book readers or a book club. That may be when you're finally at the point to say that out loud. It's not in the book, but this is, this is what it is. And now this is where it fits. Now is the proper place to put it. That's the question that needed to be asked for this answer right here.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that, because not now doesn't mean not ever.
Correct.
And I like that. So, Felicia, for someone who is listening, who is just beginning to confront their story, what is the first step they should take to approach it in a way that is both honest and supported?
I will go back to the mirror, because the question you need to ask yourself is, am I stable enough right now to carry this story, to carry this without it breaking me emotionally? Go back to that and be honest with that, because you may not yet be. Mm-hmm. And so it may take a little bit more just looking internally at yourself and your intentions of writing this story before you can open up the laptop and start typing it up, or before you put it on the notebook. Am I stable enough to do this, to carry this without it breaking me or me having a complete setback and having to start over at zero? Mm-hmm.
And Felicia, what I take away from that is we can all start but we start at different times. And we have to start when we are in a safe and secure space. And only I know that.
Absolutely.
Only I know.
Yes, and you have to put a structure in place when you're doing that. Are you, don't I'll say don't focus so much too on, oh, I just got to put everything in order. When I'm doing this, I got to do it chronologically. No, you don't. You start at the place that feels safest for you. You can start at the end if you want to, and then work your way back, in order to write.
Well, we have really began to unpack this idea of how do I go from my story, my lived experience, and then sharing that with an audience. So,
Yes.
what I would say today, we open today not just about writing. It's really about awareness. That's what we've been talking about. Awareness of what you're carrying, awareness of what your story is asking from you, and awareness of what happens when you try to face it without the right support, without that structure. Because writing what you survived is not just about getting it out, it's about understanding what is required of you to say it. Am I
Yeah.
ready to say it? Felicia, thank you for helping us bring language to what so many writers are experiencing, but cannot always explain to the audience. If you're listening and realizing that writing your story is requiring more of you than you expected, you don't have to navigate that alone. Felicia works with writers through her Aspiring Writers and Writers Workshop, helping them access their story in a way that's structured and supported. And once your story's on the page, I work with authors to refine and strengthen and elevate their writing so it communicates clearly and powerfully without the sword attacking somebody, intentionally or unintentionally. Um, so if you're ready to move forward with guidance, this is the work we do. So stay connected to the series. In our next episode, we move from awareness to understanding how to hold the weight of your story in a way that protects you. So, guys, you know the drill. Until next time, before you go trying to take care of someone else, let's make sure you take care of yourself